In Warhammer 40,000, the World Eaters are the bloodiest of the traitor legions, warbands of ravening berserkers claiming skulls for the throne of Khorne. But that wasn't always the case, and the story of how the loyalist warhounds devolved into the traitor World Eaters owes a lot to the way their broken, battered Primarch Angron was treated by an uncaring Imperium. Hiya, welcome back to Heresy 101. We are in the 12th episode of this little series where I go through the lore for each of Warhammer's Space Marine legions, particularly their origins in the grim days of the HORUS heresy. I take a look at where they are at the start of the heresy and how they got there, and then what happens to them during it. So it's worth mentioning yet again that this video contains spoilers for literally anything heresy related. At the end of the Great Crusade, the World Eaters were one of the most terrifying forces in the Imperium's arsenal. A brutal tool of conquest, a huge and powerful legion so notorious for their bloody massacres that even mention of them was enough to force compliance on fearful systems. But their slow fall towards madness had started long before with the discovery and subsequent treatment of their gene-sire, the Primarch Angron, and the Legion's bleak desire to emulate him. The history of the 12th Legion, like all the Legions, starts during the Unification Wars on Terra. Their genesis initially seemed unremarkable. They recruited from all over Old Earth with a preference for the most aggressive, competitive recruits, but that was far from uncommon amongst the early legions. They fought in small numbers alongside the mortal armies of the Imperium as shock troops, famous for triumphing against much greater forces by sheer courage and fury. But generally, across not only the Unification Wars but also the conquest of the solar system, the Emperor held them in reserve, close at hand and ready to be deployed in case of a sudden reversal of fortunes in battle or in the case of rebellion. They quickly became known as the Emperor's Warhounds, kept on a short leash, and when they were deployed, it was into some of the bloodiest battlefields. On the asteroid colony of Cerberus, they were deployed when a rebellion against Imperial rule was revealed to be led by rogue Thunder Warriors. Within 5 hours of the Warhounds being deployed, the colony was a charnel house, with all resistance slaughtered, individual Thunder Warriors laying amongst piles of Astartes dead, and the cleanup forces shocked by the brutality they witnessed. The human commander of the forces arrayed to go in after them commented, "I do not doubt my Emperor's wisdom in creating such a necessary evil as these fearful warriors, nor do I doubt their effectiveness in battle. It remains my fervent hope, however, that though I spend my life making war for the liberation of mankind, that I never again see such inhuman butchery as I witnessed in the halls of Cerberus." As the Crusade pushed outwards into the galaxy, the Warhounds continued to serve as a mobile reserve, dispatched alongside other legions like the Iron Hands or Dark Angels, or alongside the mortal troops of the Imperial Army, where they provided a furious frontline assault force assigned to take a specific objective or turn a war in the Imperium's favour, often with massive losses involved. They had a reputation for being unpredictable and dangerous to fight alongside, but this tendency towards bloody carnage was balanced by a particularly hard code of discipline and training within the Legion's ranks. In fact, when the 6th Legion finally saw service later in the Crusade, they were compared unfavourably to the Warhounds, with Crusade Command commenting on how the 6th lacked the discipline required to make them as effective as the 12th. But as the Crusade ground on and the other legions located their Primarchs and reformed under them, their role as an assault reserve became less needed. Crusade Command started grouping them into larger and larger forces directed against targets for whom annihilation was the only option. These fleets, including the famed Bloody 13th Expedition, frequently included other formations that are proven particularly uncontrollable, like the Titan Legio Audax or the Newman Gun Clans. And this grand muster of the Legion would prove timely because in the far Ultima Segmentum, the Emperor had been observing the rise of their Primarch. At the end of the Unification Wars on Terra, the 20 Primarchs, the superhuman generals and genetic templates for the legions, were scattered from the Emperor's laboratory across the galaxy in a great catastrophe. The capsule of the infant 12th Primarch came to rest on the world of Nuceria, where he was found by slave masters from the city of Deshea. Marked for the gladiatorial pits of the city, he was implanted with the ancient technology known as the Butcher's Nails, a suite of psychosurgical enhancements that worm their way deep into the brain, amplifying the anger and rage of the subject and slowly twisting the pleasure centers of the brain until nothing but violence could give relief from the pain they caused. The Primarch grew up, therefore, in captivity and in agony, rising to become Angron, the greatest gladiator of his age. But eventually he led a grand revolt, escaping the arena and leading a rampaging army across the world, destroying the cities of the so-called High Riders as they went. His army were known as the Eaters of Cities, and as they continued their campaign, the forces of the High Riders finally corralled them with 5 separate armies. Angron's Eaters of Cities refused to run, and they prepared for their final battle, a battle they were certain to lose. But unknown to Angron, the Emperor had already located his 12th Primarch. Upon confronting him and making an offer of a place at his side, to the Emperor's surprise, he was refused and rejected. Angron had sworn to live and die with his followers, and that was exactly what he intended to do. The Emperor, however, would not accept this, and the night before the final onslaught forcibly teleported the enraged Primarch away from the slaughter that followed, as the rebellious slaves were butchered to the last man and woman. This was a deed for which Angron would never forgive the Emperor, and a stain upon the Primarch's honour that would never fade but fester into a soul-deep wound. It's unrecorded what happened next. The Emperor attempted to fix his son to remove the nails, but they were embedded too deep, and so at some point the enraged Primarch was handed over to the warhounds of the 13th Expedition and placed in command. How he begrudgingly accepted that command is unknown, but he was at first so furious that half the Warhound's high command were wiped out attempting to reason with their new father. Only the captain of the 8th Assault Company, Khorne, seemed to be able to get through, and became his Primarch's equerry and often de facto commander of the Legion in all but name. But once Angron was there, changes started to spread through the Legion's culture. To the Legionnaires, the mutilated, bloody, reeking, wrathful figure that now stalked amongst them as their father became a kind of savage messiah, a greater warrior than any had known, and an exemplar of a brutal ideal of honour and combat that sang to their souls. He imposed an almost tribal unity on them. Their training, always brutal, became even more so, as deadly as any battlefield. Close combat drills replaced with the gladiatorial simplicity of the dueling circles, and the Legionnaires' eventual fate in the melee of battle became such a certainty that a black, rebellious humour came to define the Legion. In an attempt to emulate their father, and with his support, the Legion's apothecaries constructed crude versions of the Butcher's Nails, and more of the Legion opted for the surgery, until only the oldest of the Warhounds and the remnants of the Legion's Librarius were without them. But the rest of the Legion no longer saw themselves as Warhounds anyway. They were Angron's new Legion, the Eaters of Worlds. When the 12th Legion rejoined the Crusade, they quickly forged an even more troubling reputation than they had before. Every campaign the World Eaters conducted was fought to the death, whole populations butchered and their worlds left barren and lifeless, whether they were Xenos empires or humans who just resisted compliance. In fact, their reputation became so dark that even the mention of them could make non-compliant systems surrender wholesale. Though it was brutal, their record was efficient, but eventually the tales of atrocities and murders proved too much even for Crusade Command, and many of Angron's brother Primarchs grew wary of him, or of serving alongside him. Guilliman of the Ultramarines in particular deplored his methods. But Angron had a dark and casual charisma and wasn't without his supporters. Horus considered them a great asset to the Crusade, an efficient tool of war, and when controversy grew in high command after the Gehenna massacre, where the World Eaters butchered an entire planet's population in a single night, the Emperor, perhaps too late in the day, asked Horus to work closely with the misguided 12th Legion and to watch over and mentor their Primarch. So, when Horus began his descent into rebellion, there was already one bitter and wrathful brother close at hand, dissatisfied with the Imperium. As Angron would later remark to Lorgar, "Let history mark my words well, for I care nothing about who sits proud on the throne of terror when the last day dawns. Horus is a fine commander, but that's the limit of my admiration for that arrogant, preening bastard. I joined his rebellion because I can tolerate him easier than I can endure the abomination that names himself master of mankind. You want the truth of my life and death? I am Angron, the Eater of Worlds, and I'm already dead. I died over 100 years ago in the mountains north of the city that enslaved me. At the start of the Heresy, the World Eaters were extremely well supplied and supported, numbering around 150,000 legionnaires with a fleet of at least 60 capital ships and support from the Mechanicus of Sarum and the Ember Wolves Titan Legion, though about a quarter of this number would be sacrificed on the killing fields of Isstvan III as the Legion purged its ranks of any remaining loyalists. The 12th Legion's initial organisation had been based, like all the legions, around the Principia Bellicosa, with a bias towards close assault and tactical infantry formations, and Angron had little interest in directly changing this, but under his rule the World Eaters shifted even further in that direction. They preferred sudden, aggressive drop pod assaults from orbit, with mass close combat equipped squads going in first, backed up by a second wave of heavy armour and support squads. Even through this, they maintained and utilised every tool of war in the Legion's arsenal, from artillery to armoured assault, but these were considered a means to an end. They were all just ways for the Legion to deliver its assault squads into the heart of the enemy and end them. And all legionnaires, even support troops, exhibited a preference for hand-to-hand combat, often carrying all sorts of secondary melee weapons like combat blades or chain bayonets. Angron also refined the use of the chain axe, which gained such a reputation in battle with the World Eaters that other legions started to adopt it. Their attrition rates were always incredibly high, so the Legion had a highly efficient recruitment and implantation process, drawing from a huge range of worlds. By the end of the Crusade period, the use of the Primarch's genetic material to speed up the process and the implantation of the Butcher's nails to heighten the recruit's aggression was almost standard practice, helped by the fact that the later Legion tended to operate as one homogeneous army. The modified nails, though, were unstable technology, and instances of implant degradation and the resulting homicidal frenzy were not uncommon, with many of these legionnaires grouped into suicide squads or the berserker assault units known as rampager squads. The rank structure of the Legion was simple and direct, with trial by combat an effective method of advancement for a legionnaire, if they survived. There were few other formations within the Legion. The Devourers were nominally the Primarch's bodyguards, though really they were mostly ignored by him, and the Red Butcher's Terminators, or the Kaidere assault squads, were more practical uses for legionnaires lost to the nails than an organisational body. During the Heresy, this structure was to break down even further. When the Legion purged itself of loyalists on Isstvan, Angron insisted on deploying to the surface against the orders of the War Master, and they were some of the last to remain before the virus bombs fell. They fought in the Urgal Depression during the drop site massacre on Isstvan V, but as Angron became less and less stable and the nails wormed their way further and further into his brain, the Legion and its Primarch were assigned to support his brother Lorgar and the Wordbearers on their Shadow Crusade through the Ultramar sector. It was then that Lorgar located the world of Nuceria once again, and Angron learned of his legacy, that the stories about him weren't of a glorious gladiator, but one of betrayal, how Angron left his comrades to die to the High Rider's lances. Enraged upon hearing this, Angron's armies were deployed against the cities of Nuceria a final time, butchering the inhabitants until they were caught up by pursuing Ultramarines forces led by Guillermin himself, chasing the Wordbearers since the Battle of Calth. On the same killing fields where the Eaters of Cities died, the three Primarchs fought, and Lorgar's long plan to save his brother from the nails came to fruition. He offered up the 12th Legion and their Primarch to the Chaos God Khorne, and Angron was the first of the Primarchs to achieve immortality as a demon prince. After this, the 12th Primarch became uncontrollable. During the Siege of Terror, he insisted on leading the charge and had to be restrained aboard the Night Lord's flagship, the Nightfall, until the psychic barriers that protected the palace could be brought down. When the Legion finally committed themselves in force, their Primarch at their head, it was to lead the charge against the Eternity Gate, and the World Eaters continued their slaughter long after Horus had been cast down by the Emperor, and the heresy effectively ended. They were the last of the traitor legions to leave Terra. And that's the 12th Legion. Always fractious and bloody, their excesses were held in check by draconian discipline and a privileged place at the side of the Emperor, until late in the Crusade and with the Emperor racing against time, their broken, battered Primarch was placed in command, into a position he never wanted anyway. And when the legionnaires of the 12th, denied any remaining chance of honour or glory, sought to emulate him, they quickly devolved into the mindless berserkers we're familiar with from 40k. Thanks for watching. Okay, so if you'd like more of these videos, then there'll be another one coming up in a little box there on the right. And if you'd like to occasionally get videos early or just support the channel, there's a Patreon link in the thing below. See ya.